This podcast contains adult themes and graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
A commercial-free version of this podcast is available on Patreon for $1 per month. Patreon.com/Beyond Contempt podcast. I'm Renee, and this is Beyond Contempt True Crime. I'm going to close out February with one last case of Valentine's Day mariticide. You're listening to episode 35, Love Hurts, Richard Schoeck. Stacey Morgan came into this world in 1971. She lived in Florida with her parents, but lost her father when she was young. Her mom found a new partner, and Stacey quickly had a stepdad in her life. She said she was molested during this time, but never named the person who allegedly committed the crime. Stacey was the type of person who loved to be in love, and she fell in love just as quickly as she fell out. She met husband number one when she was in high school. It was a swift trip to the marriage altar, followed by 2 short years before she filed for a divorce. At age 20, Stacey married husband number 2. She had their first child right after the wedding ceremony, and she celebrated her 1-year wedding anniversary with a divorce. At age 22, Stacey attended college and earned a degree in nursing and psychology because she wanted a better job to provide for her son. In 1997, she was in her mid-20s when she married husband number 3. This was the shortest of all our marriages, and it only lasted 6 weeks. Stacey swore off having intense relationships, but gave birth to a son in 1998, during a period when she was single. She received a pay raise after taking a new job in Atlanta, working as an administrator in a surgery clinic. Stacey started off the 3rd decade of her life by marrying husband number 4. The couple lived outside of Atlanta, where she gave birth to her 3rd son. She separated from husband number 4 in 2005. It wasn't long before she met Richard Schoeck. Richard was employed at the same hospital where Stacey worked, and he was a graphic designer. Richard was born on June 25, 1963, in Glen Ridge, New Jersey. He was an Auburn University graduate and majored in art. Richard had a daring side, which included piloting hot air balloons and driving his motorcycle on the winding Georgia mountain roads. He also enjoyed tamer activities, like cooking and attending Westminster Presbyterian Church. Richard wasn't concerned that Stacey had several marriages before they met. The couple eloped in 2007, and Richard became husband number 5. He loved Stacey's kids and even adopted the youngest 2. He quit his job as a facilities manager and stayed home to take care of them, since Stacey was making good money as the head administrator of the Spine and Neurosurgery Clinic in DeKalb County, Georgia. Richard was a super stepdad of sorts. He was the den leader for the boys' Cub Scout troop. He coached their soccer games and was always present at school for all their activities. On February 14, 2010, Stacey left work and met Richard at her grandparents' house. Richard made a nice dinner for everyone. After dinner, Stacey and Richard had a risque evening planned. They were going to meet up at Belton Bridge Park to exchange Valentine's Day gifts. Stacey's grandparents were elderly and required around-the-clock nursing care. She told Richard to take off ahead of her, since the nurse who was supposed to care for her grandparents was running late. Richard left around 8:15 p.m., since he had to fill his truck up with gas. This kind of outing was typical for the Schoecks. Their relationship had always been filled with adventurous outings. Richard readied the Valentine's Day card, along with the sparkling grape juice and cups, in anticipation of having sex in the secluded shadows of Belton Bridge Park. Stacey left her grandparents' house around 9:15 p.m. She called Richard's cell phone, but he wasn't picking up. She arrived at the park and found Richard laying on the ground, close to his truck. At 9:32 p.m., Stacey called 911, believing that Richard must have experienced a heart attack. When the detective arrived, they determined 46-year-old Richard Schoeck had been shot multiple times at close range. He took 3 to the chest, 2 to the head, and 1 to the hand. They ruled robbery out as a motivating factor, since his watch, wedding ring, and wallet were still there. $40 sat in the middle console of his $40,000 idling truck. The park was concealed, but not in a cozy way, as there was no pavement or lights. Police weren't sure what could have happened, and perhaps thought Richard interrupted another couple in the park, and a conflict grew out of that interaction. There were a few sets of tire tracks that had left impressions in the soft sand of the park. After ruling out tracks from Richard and Stacey's vehicles, the detectives identified a third set of tracks, and later on concluded the tracks were made by Goodyear Integrity tires. Since there was a third set of tracks, Stacey was not automatically a suspect, but they, of course, took her down to the police station for an initial interview. With no prompting, Stacey admitted she'd been having an affair for several years with a man named Juan Reyes. Juan was much younger than Richard and worked at the same medical office as Stacey. She hired him as a surgical assistant, despite him lacking medical experience. In his prior job, he worked as a security guard at an upscale hotel. Stacey claimed the reason she and Richard planned on meeting in the park was to reignite the spark in their marriage because of her infidelity. She told authorities that Juan was not a violent man and would never harm anyone, but he knew she was meeting up with Richard at the park. Police needed to learn more about Juan Reyes and set up an interview with their number one suspect. Juan was a divorced dad who was low on cash and high in mouths to feed. Stacey provided Juan with all kinds of gifts. She took care of his cell phone bill, paid for his truck, took him on romantic vacations, and even allowed him to live in one of her rentals. She had an apartment where they would meet up for quick rendezvous. Juan agreed to speak with police without retaining a lawyer. He did not know who killed Richard. He was not aware that Richard and Stacey were meeting up in a park for Valentine's Day. Juan actually thought they had an open marriage. He wasn't too concerned about his relationship with Stacey. From his perspective, it was more about the monetary value she provided, and emotions were not part of that exchange for him. Juan was actually trying to reconcile with his ex-wife, who was unemployed. He also agreed to a polygraph test, but the results were not conclusive. Police brought in Juan's ex-wife for questioning, and she confirmed his alibi. Juan took their son to the video store. They had dinner as a family and were in bed early that night. Police had to regroup and refocus their efforts back on Stacey to figure out what might have happened to Richard Schoeck. An IT professional who worked at the spine clinic with Stacey reached out to the police when he noticed a strange pattern. Stacey had deleted all the emails from her inbox around the time of Richard's murder. Part of his job was to clear the junk mail out of all the employees' email accounts. He noticed on February 12th, 13th, and 14th, Stacey's emails were deleted from her inbox. After the police secured a warrant, he provided them with thousands of her emails that had been kept by the IT employee. Police spent a lot of time sifting through the emails and found a few that piqued their interest. One email was to a bank and asked to transfer money from the account that Stacey shared with the doctor at the medical center to a woman named Lenitra Ross. The amount of the transfer was just over $8,900 on January 26th. And there was a second transfer to Lenitra on Friday, February 12th, for $1,100. When detectives looked into Lenitra Ross, they discovered she also worked as a medical assistant and billing coder at the same surgery clinic as Stacey. When authorities followed up with Lenitra at her home, they learned she was renting from Stacey Schoeck. Her explanation for receiving sizable sums of money from Schoeck was the money paid for repairs on the house due to water damage. She claimed to have the receipts to prove it. As detectives were trying to figure out how Lenitra Ross fit into Richard's murder, they dug into Stacey's cell phone records. Belton Bridge Park only had coverage from one cell phone tower. They filed a court order to receive a tower dump of all the cell phone data in a 4-hour period around the time when Richard was murdered. Stacey had given police consent to take information from her cell phone. Her contacts list was compared with all the phone numbers that pinged the tower the night Richard was killed. They found a match from a person named Reggie in Stacey's contacts, whose call showed up in the cell phone tower log. It turned out that Reggie had placed a call to Lenitra Ross. Reginald Coleman was from Philadelphia and had a felony record. He moved to Atlanta for a fresh start and created a fitness business called Mr. Results. He even held training sessions at the medical office where Stacey and Lenitra worked. Police filed a warrant to get cell phone records from both Ross and Coleman. On the night of the murder, Coleman called Ross at 8:40 p.m. from the scene of the crime. He called her a second time at 8:57 p.m., but this call registered on another cell tower further south in a small city called Flowery Branch. At 9 p.m., Ross sent a text to Stacey Schoeck. "Don't forget I'm coming in late tomorrow. Forgot to remind you. Happy Valentine's Day." Reginald Coleman had thousands upon thousands of calls and messages between January 1st and March 15th that pinged various cell phone towers, but he only had one call that registered to the cell phone tower by the crime scene and one call that registered to the tower in Flowery Branch. He made those 2 calls on the night of Richard's murder. The police checked the tread pattern of Coleman's car, and it did not match the pattern found at the crime scene. During the investigation, police received a call from Stacey Schoeck's cousin, Connie Hearn. Stacey was in charge of the grandparents' Chevy Impala. She was supposed to sell the car, and the proceeds were to fund their grandparents' medical care. The car lived in Stacey's driveway, but it was missing. Stacey told her family members that the car brought in $14,000. Her cousin Connie was concerned because that money never showed up in their grandparents' account. Law enforcement tried to track the Impala down. Stacey sold the car to a woman named Alicia Flores, who was the mother of her co-pilot in Infidelity, Juan Reyes. Alicia Flores could not qualify for a bank loan, so Schoeck told her she could pay whatever she could each month. Alicia paid $100 in April and another $100 in May before police seized the car as evidence. The Impala had Goodyear Integrity tires, and they matched the tread pattern found at the scene of the crime. Police were not yet sure how this fit into the triangular story of Stacey Schoeck, Lenitra Ross, and Reginald Coleman. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Thank you to Best Fiends for sponsoring this episode of Beyond Contempt True Crime. Podcast listeners, let me tell you about Best Fiends. It's an engaging puzzle game that everyone is playing. It's a casual game that you play on your phone. I've even played it on my iPad before. Well, mostly because the eyesight ain't what it used to be. But Best Fiends keeps adding new levels and events every single month, so they keep it entertaining. It's a great game to play when I need to take a break from writing podcast scripts. And you don't need to be tethered to Wi-Fi because you can play without an internet connection. Engage your brain with fun puzzles and collect tons of cute characters. Trust me, with over 100 million downloads, this 5-star rated mobile puzzle game is a must-play. Download Best Fiends, free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends. Hi everyone. I really need to tell you about BetterHelp Online Counseling. It's an affordable service where you can connect with one of their licensed professional therapists. You can find counselors that specialize in just about anything, including anxiety, depression, family conflicts, trauma, and LGBTQ issues. I work from home and barely leave my house, so it's great that you can communicate with your counselor from the privacy of your own home. BetterHelp is more affordable than traditional in-person counseling, and financial aid is available. So many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states, and you can start talking with your counselor in less than 24 hours. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/beyondcontempt. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that's betterhelp.com/beyondcontempt. Now, back to the show. Police now felt they had enough evidence for search warrants and arrests. They fittingly named this arrest campaign Operation Tangled Web. Detectives tried to tightly coordinate their arrests to prevent the suspects from notifying each other and destroying evidence. On May 25th, they searched all their homes. In Coleman's home, investigators found his cell phone, bank records and card, and pills. They found a 9mm gun and a receipt from a pawn shop for the gun in Ross's home. From Schoeck's home, they took computers, financial records, electronics, and a diary. They were all arrested on May 25th. Coleman was captured first, and Ross was a few hours later. They both refused to cooperate during their interviews. Schoeck hid in a room at the medical clinic, which required a security badge in order to access it. It didn't buy her much time, and police subsequently arrested her. Just the day prior, she pretended that her life was normal and attended a balloon release gathering that celebrated the memory of her husband, Richard. She took to Facebook to write a seemingly heartfelt message. "These are the hardest days of my life. I am changed forever. Thank you all for your thoughts, prayers, and comfort. I have no words." While Coleman and Ross's lips were sealed, Stacey spilled all the details to investigators. One of her sons had stolen something from a store. Stacey felt he was acting out because she had shoplifted as a teenager, which stemmed from being molested. She concluded that her son, too, was being molested. In December 2009, she decided that calling the police and divorcing Richard was not the solution. She wanted him dead. Schoeck started seeking people who would help her commit the crime. She tried to hire a person who was known for his illegal dealings, but he never returned her call. In January 2010, Stacey Schoeck and Lenitra Ross went to lunch and discussed the whole situation. Ross's on-again, off-again boyfriend, Reginald Coleman, would gladly take on this job. Ross said that he was not unfamiliar with this type of work and did it as a side hustle. A week later, Schoeck followed up with Ross to see if she had talked with Coleman. Ross confirmed that he would take on the job. Ross had already done some planning and thought about the crime taking place in Belton Bridge Park. It was dark, private, and it was close to Schoeck's grandparents. Schoeck paid Coleman $10,000, as evidenced by the emails and financial records seized by law enforcement. She also gave Ross the home that Ross was renting from her. The three parties were content with their agreement. Coleman would make it look like a robbery gone bad, and he would commit the murder on Valentine's Day. Schoeck lent Ross and Coleman her grandparents' Impala, and that was the car Coleman drove on the night of the murder. This explained why Coleman's personal car tires didn't match the tread marks found at the crime scene. But the Impala's Goodyear Integrity tires were a perfect match. Schoeck also took out $600 from a cash machine to cover the cost of a gun Coleman needed. Ross and Schoeck had dinner at Coleman's house to finalize plans, and they decided to perform murder site reconnaissance. The trio met up again on January 23, 2010, at a Walmart parking lot in Buford, Georgia, and then headed over to Belton Bridge Park to hash out the last details. Shortly after that, Schoeck made 2 transfers to Ross that totaled $10,000. Ross wrote out several checks to cash for the amounts of $4,900, $2,500, and $3,632.50 between February 3rd and February 12th. On February 5th, Ross wrote a $700 check to Coleman. Schoeck took out life insurance policies in November 2009, one of which did not take effect until February 1st, 2010, which was just prior to the murder. The total value of the policies was $560,000. Ross called Schoeck on February 14th while she was at her grandparents' house to verify the color of Richard's truck. Police believe Richard stepped out of his truck at Belton Bridge Park because he recognized the Chevy Impala. He walked towards the car, and that is when Coleman opened fire on him. Coleman then failed to make the crime scene look like a robbery. As Stacey Schoeck continued to reveal everything about the crime so she could save herself from the death penalty, in addition to the molestation claims, she claimed to be fearful of losing her sons to a custody battle with Richard. He had adopted her 2 younger boys, and if she divorced him, she worried that her affair with Juan would surface in court. Investigators followed up with Schoeck's son about the potential sexual abuse he experienced at the hands of Richard. The boy claimed that Richard never harmed him, and he never spoke with his mom about anything related to the topic. In June 2010, Stacey Schoeck, Lenitra Ross, and Reginald Coleman were indicted on charges of malice murder for the death of Richard Schoeck. Lenitra Ross was the first party to go to trial in May 2012. Richard's family was there and stood in solidarity, wearing T-shirts decorated with pictures of hot air balloons that honored Richard's love of his favorite pastime. Ross's trial was a capital murder case. Schoeck cut a deal with prosecution and testified against Ross in exchange for not facing the death penalty in her own trial. Schoeck claimed that she was there to testify and tell the truth for Richard. Lenitra Ross was found guilty of malice murder based on the role she played as both the planner and the go-between in the murder of Richard Schoeck. They sentenced her to life without parole in August 2012. Later on, Ross appealed her sentence on the grounds of ineffective counsel, and the court failed to suppress certain cell phone records that led to her conviction. The courts upheld her sentence. Reginald Coleman's trial was held in November 2012. The trial was quick, and he pleaded guilty to murder to avoid the death penalty. He also faced additional charges related to being a convicted felon and having a gun. Part of his defense was related to his time spent growing up in the foster care system and how he witnessed so many people who were abused. When Stacey told Coleman that her husband was molesting her kids, he wanted to help. Reginald Coleman, aka Mr. Results, was sentenced to life without parole, and they tacked a few extra years on because of the gun charge. Prior to her trial in December 2012, Stacey Schoeck underwent a psych evaluation. They deemed her to be of sound mind and body. They also believed that Schoeck was a sociopath. Many of Richard's family and friends were in the courtroom for the entire trial. Schoeck's defense team tried to use Stacey's history of abuse as a major part of her defense. The prosecution's position was if she really suspected Richard had molested her kids, she would have never left them home alone all day with Richard, since he was a stay-at-home dad. Schoeck never told investigators about this molestation claim in her initial police interview, where she revealed she was having an affair. They felt Schoeck made up the story for her own benefit. Stacey Schoeck avoided the death penalty because of her cooperation with the state and was sentenced to life without parole for the murder of Richard Schoeck. Initially, Stacey Schoeck and Lenitra Ross were sent to different prisons because the prosecution did not want their case harmed with tainted witness testimony. After the trials, the two women ended up in the same facility, the Pulaski State Prison in Hawkinsville, Georgia. Stacey Schoeck's family received custody of her 3 boys. It was last reported that the 2 oldest graduated high school, and the youngest son lives with his biological father. In prison, Stacey Schoeck found religion. She wanted to work towards becoming an ordained minister and earned an associate's degree in Bible studies. She is attempting to repay her debt to society by becoming a productive member of her prison community. Because of her background in healthcare, Schoeck spends some of her time educating her prison peers about their rights to healthcare, lifestyle health risks, and how to protect themselves during their incarceration. Schoeck worked on publishing children's books for kids with incarcerated parents. She spends a portion of her time writing essays, short stories, and poetry. Her poetry is a reflection on incarceration, life, and love. One of her poems that was published to the internet reads, "Life without parole. Hell that has no end. Bent, hopeless, hammering, wanting it to end. What is life when you cannot fly? What is life when you want to die? Life is love, love is life. No way out, no right, no flight. Moving on, no end in sight. It's love without parole." Richard Schoeck's family and friends miss him dearly. While he had some bold hobbies with piloting hot air balloons and riding motorcycles, he will most be remembered for having a big heart and being a positive light that touched so many people's lives. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Beyond Contempt. I'm so happy to be moving away from the frigid temperatures of February in Wisconsin and heading into a warmer, more temperate spring. Please visit BeyondContemptPodcast.com for links to the sources and music used in this episode. Research, writing, editing, audio production, and music scoring were performed by me. Hopefully it is warming up wherever you live. If you like the show, please leave me a favorable review in Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much, everyone.